So this is big. China has just signed the biggest LNG deal in history with Qatar, and it's a 27-year deal. Now this is a big turning point for the world order because we are seeing the Chinese secure the most important resource any country needs, and that is energy. That is by far the most important resource today. You control energy and you control the future. And when you have limitless energy, especially at a good price, you can grow your economy faster and take another step towards becoming a superpower. So, according to the landmark deal, China signed a $60 billion agreement with Qatar for 4 million tons of LNG a year starting in 2026. And this is groundbreaking because the deal is going to last for 27 long years. And this is coming during a time when Europe is suffering from a lack of LNG, but they are unwilling to commit to long term contracts with Qatar. But the Qataris, they are demanding long term LNG deals to supply the EU with natural gas. So China struck first, and they struck hard. Now, Qatar's energy minister described the situation best. He said, the deal will further solidify the excellent bilateral relations and help meet China's growing energy needs. He went on to further state, a lot of Asian buyers are actually approaching us to have a long-term deal because they see the volumes of gas that are coming in the future are less and less. And this means the energy crisis we are seeing now will likely persist and more buyers are willing to secure their supply even if prices seem relatively high today. And we need to realize that China's world tour for energy isn't going to end, guys. They are realizing the key to the future doesn't just lie with energy, it lies with a partnership with the Middle East. And we are beginning to see the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia, drift closer towards China and Asia. China's move to buy 27 years worth of LNG from Qatar doesn't just guarantee its energy security, it also locks out the collective West from energy as well. Now, this pushes prices up and puts additional pressure on Europe, which is on the verge of breaking. Remember, guys, this energy crisis in Europe isn't going to end in 2023. According to Bloomberg, energy demand in the Eurozone is going to soar by 60% through 2026, and winter is coming. And with Europe cut away from Russian gas and China putting pressure on gas contracts in the Middle East, we are seeing a new power play happening over the global energy supply. And that's why we have to pay attention to this move from China because there are three levels to this deal we need to understand. China's energy security is at the heart of this agreement, that's for sure, but it's more about building an economic alliance with the Middle East. Qatar is not going to be the last country China will approach to build an economic alliance with. So we have to understand how important energy security is for China. They have been watching the energy crisis go on in Europe and the United States, and they know how important it is to secure your oil and your gas supply. Now, if you can guarantee a consistent supply of energy from reliable sources that won't sanction you, that is key. You have guaranteed economic growth for decades to come. And China's going to need that going forward into the future. Now, if Russian energy controlled the production of Germany's manufacturing base, China's dependence on energy is even more critical. They are the world's factory. And this is why we are seeing China buying their energy imports from countries that are friendly to them. We can see just from the crude oil alone, the top suppliers are a mixture of countries that China can trust. They are a mixture of the BRICS nations and the Middle East. We have Saudi Arabia and Russia on top, followed by Iraq, Oman, the UAE, and Brazil. In fact, China is swimming in cheap energy thanks to Russia. They have spent almost $60 billion from the start of the year on Russian energy, and this isn't going to end. China has a dedicated gas supply from Russia through the Power of Siberia pipeline, which can pump 50 billion cubic meters of natural gas a year. And they are going to extend this pipeline further into the heart of China. And let's remember that China signed a 30-year deal with Russia worth $400 billion back in 2019, so energy from Putin is secured. China is now Russia's main outlet for energy, especially after sanctions hit them. And if we look towards the Middle East, the biggest player in OPEC, Saudi Arabia, has also pledged their support to China. We have Saudi Aramco pledging to ensure China's energy security is its highest priority for the next 50 years and beyond. And that's not all. The company is building a major refinery in China that can refine up to 300,000 barrels a day of crude oil. Now, this is how committed the Middle East is to their energy partnership with China. And this is big because if you combine all these deals with Qatar's 27-year gas contract, China has all the energy inputs they need for a generation. The next 50 years or so is secured. And right now, we have China in lockdown, which is muting down their energy demand. Their energy consumption is actually suppressing the global demand for oil and gas. And in fact, we can see that China is the biggest consumer of energy, almost double that of the United States. So once China comes out of their lockdowns, they would have secured decades of energy supply before the price starts to rise. When the biggest consumer of energy suddenly wakes up, global energy demand will skyrocket, and China will be in the lead with tons of locked in cheap and stable energy, especially from the Russians. What I can say is that sanctions on Russia has backfired and the big winners are the Chinese. But let's realize that energy security is just the tip of the iceberg. Yes, it's important, but there's a bigger agenda behind China's energy deals with Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and that is to eventually establish a PetroYuan. They would like to set up a situation similar to the petrodollar, where oil is priced in their local currency, the Chinese yuan, and they're going to the birthplace of the world reserve currency, which is the Middle East. Now, we do not know the details of the LNG deal with Qatar. It is likely still priced in dollars, but it wouldn't surprise me if a portion of it might be settled in yuan. And if that happens, it is a game changer for the world. Now, if suddenly the yuan can be used to buy energy from the Middle East, doesn't matter if it's oil or gas, it opens up a world of possibilities and pushes down the dollar as a reserve currency. There's suddenly more competition around the block. Now, this might sound like a fantasy, but here's a surprising fact. Since 2015, Qatar is home to the first Chinese yuan clearing hub in the Middle East, and this is very important. It means Qatar is helping to facilitate transactions in Chinese yuan. The clearing banks, they are equipped with the capital and the resources to allow trade in the region to be directly settled in yuan. In fact, China's ICBC Bank, they cleared more than $86 billion in yuan transactions alone in just the first 2 years, and this amount is only going to grow. So if you're Saudi Arabia and you want to buy and sell stuff using the Chinese yuan, you can easily do it in Qatar. This is going to increase bilateral trade between the Middle East and China and set up the framework for eventual petro-yuan. Because if you think about it, all the pieces are slowly starting to fit. We have China dumping treasuries, buying tons of gold, and now signing decades-long energy deals with the Middle East. And this is all part of a bigger de-dollarization strategy. China is doing all they can to try to dethrone the US dollar. We already have Putin selling Russian gas for yuan, and it's not a stretch to think that the Saudis or Qataris could one day price their energy contracts in yuan as well. And if that happens, we'll start to see a great reshuffling of the world order. So let's go even deeper now. The petro-yuan is definitely an agenda that China has, but that's only one part. What China also desires to get the Middle East and OPEC together as a whole. We already have Saudi Arabia expressing interest to join BRICS, and I don't think it will just stop there. China has two platforms to leverage and build economic alliance with the Middle East. We have the BRICS group that includes Russia, India, and Brazil, but also the SEO, which comprises over 30% of global GDP. And this is a very huge economic bloc, and guess what? Qatar and Saudi Arabia, they are dialogue partners, putting them one step closer to becoming full members. We have to understand what this means. Right now, we are literally seeing two great economic divides in the world. We have the Western Bloc, which is more or less NATO countries that includes the United States, EU, and Canada. Then we have the Eastern Bloc that includes the BRICS nations and the SEO. And not surprisingly, this is going to be a battle of influence between the US and China. Now, even during the APEC summit, we even saw Emmanuel Macron of France mentioning there are two main orders in the world. Are you either on the US or the Chinese side? Now, he went on to make a bizarre statement of how these orders are a mistake and we need a single global order, a new world order. Now, there's a whole other can of worms that I'll probably address it in another video. But here's the key point. If Saudi Arabia and Qatar forms an economic alliance with China, we're going to see a consolidation of energy producers on one side. Now, this will be a group that controls the majority of commodities in the world. We are talking about wheat, base metals, gold, and most importantly, oil and gas. If we just examine natural gas alone, the United States currently sits on the top of the food chain with a 23% share of the world's production. But if Qatar and Saudi Arabia joins BRICS, they'll have a combined share of 30%. And that is more than the US and Canada combined as well. So the economic potential is here. And just imagine a world where 30% of gas supply gets priced in the Chinese yuan. There will be a powerful move towards de-dollarization, and it's not impossible with the way things are going. So we gotta watch carefully this geopolitical game of chess, because at the moment, the Chinese are winning while the West is making mistake after mistake. And all this really started because of the sanctions on Russia. We all know that, right? This is the law of unintended consequences and how one action can backfire badly down the road. And because of Western sanctions, you now have China scrambling to secure their energy needs while de-dollarizing at the same time. Biden's insistence on Saudi Arabia to pump more oil has also backfired because now we are seeing the Middle East drawing closer to Asia. Now, China is slowly beginning to review their cards, and honestly, anything is possible in 2023 and beyond. Just think to yourself, why is China buying so much gold, and why aren't they updating their gold reserves? Because it sure sounds to me that this goes beyond just diversifying dollars into a hard asset. I won't be surprised if a gold-backed currency really evolves from this stockpiling of gold. And what we are seeing is a step-by-step strategy to reduce the world's reliance on the dollar. If China continues to buy huge amounts of oil and gas from the Middle East, they might be able to leverage that position to buy commodities using the yuan. Arab countries already account for $330 billion worth of bilateral trade with China, and there are rumors that the Gulf states are seeing value in propagating the digital yuan as an alternative to the dollar. Remember that as China continues to trade more of the world, and as the West continues slapping sanctions around, this will make the case for the Chinese yuan stronger as a reserve currency. So let's carefully watch what happens in the Middle East and focus our attention there, because the real action, the changing world order, will likely start if Saudi Arabia or Qatar starts pricing their energy outside of the dollar. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Did China make a smart move there, LNG? Will the Middle East break the petrodollar system? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, guys. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.